Hello there, YouTube. This is an episode of The Thoughts of No One in Particular in direct reaction to a news story. Hopefully I'll have that news story link below. Find it again. But in particular, this is a news story from America about a potential vice president candidate. Now he's failed his president bid. Newt Gingrich is a potential vice president candidate. Oh dear. He's now proposing that Americans push for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to be amended to contain the right to bear arms. I live in one of the strictest gun control countries in the world, the UK, and I can tell you, it's a great thing not having shitloads of guns around. Just for some perspective, Atheist Aussie did a video recently where he was attacking the US Libertine, who was spouting ignorance about Europe and the wider world, and he pointed out that among murders, in America, it's around 82% of murders involve firearms. In Britain, 8%. And for all our media which has a serious problem with right-wing bias in places, with Murdoch moving in, with people like Dirty Des around, but that's another story. Pushing for sort of, going on about, gun crime this, gun crime that. Gun crime is exceptionally rare. Whereas a kid getting shot over here, anywhere in the country, is headline news across the country. In America, that's a Tuesday. So it's not really big news when. So it's only really big news when there is some deeper dimension to it, and even then it can not be. Look at the case of Aaron Watts, which has got pretty much no coverage whatsoever, despite being it's not a private gun problem, but it's a police gun problem, and I will go on to explain that later. But yes, it's just ridiculous that a guy who actually openly said that he would ignore the United Nations and that he didn't want anything to do with the United Nations, now wanting to dictate to the United Nations what the rest of the world considers rights. And as far as I'm concerned, again, I live in a country where there pretty much are no guns, but a gun is not a right, it is a responsibility. And in the UK, there is some degree of private ownership of firearms, but it's very heavily controlled. You can apply for a firearm license, provided you have a good reason. And that good reason does not include self-defense. It will never include self-defense. You've got to have some kind of reason. You've got to be, for example, a farmer who's got to shoot things on land, animals on the land. You've got to be a historical reenactor who needs to have a firearms license to use his historical weapons. But other than that, you're not allowed it. And once you've got the license, it's not a case of you can store a gun wherever you like you can in a lot of places in the US. You have to purchase a secure gun cabinet, which has to be bolted to a wall, and it has to be secure, and your gun has to be in there at all times when it's not being used. At any point, the police can call all licensed firearms in an area in. This is very rare that they do this. Normally it's only in sort of deep rural areas when there's a shotgun incident, which is again extremely rare. But the effect of these strict laws, as I said, we have a very very rare occurrence of gun crime. Occasionally there will be a scaremongering story saying, "Oh, they found a machine gun in such and such a place. Oh, there's all sorts of guns." Most of those guns will never be used. Even the criminally owned guns will never be used, because most criminals worth their salt know that if you walk around with a gun, you're attracting the attention of the very few police officers in this country who are armed. That's another great thing about gun control. We don't have to arm all our police officers. But the ones we do arm, we make damn sure they can shoot straight. And they know when to shoot and when not to shoot. We have had a couple of incidents where they have taken, but that's human error. That's regrettable, but that's human error. Most of the time, they are very professional units. They are better trained than most of the American SWAT teams, equipped about the same. They're better trained, and in fact, they do some training with our infamous special forces, the SAS. That's how well trained they are. In the so-called Death House, which is a live ammo testing training facility, indoor training facility. Contrary to its name, I don't think anybody's actually died in a training exercise there, thankfully. Yeah. So we have this culture where guns are extremely rare, gun crime is extremely rare, and despite all the attempts to paint it as otherwise by mostly American media, mostly right-wing within this country, we are perfectly happy with our guns over here. And the idea, well, not that anybody pays any attention to the UN whatsoever, but the idea of having the right to bear arms as a human right in the UN Charter is despicable. And it's applying something across the entire world that just doesn't apply across the entire world. And I mean, to be honest, I don't think it really applies in America with some of the idiots you have with perfectly legal firearms. It's a bit silly that you have a serious gun problem over there, and the funny thing is, you're not even the most lax gun-controlled country in the planet. That will be Finland, but they have half the gun crime rate. But that's mainly because of the few people. Again, because although you can get hold of guns very easily, most people are using them to get rid of marauding wildlife, which is on the decrease in America. There are rough areas, but considering most gun owners will probably be in the city, it's more or less superfluous. Anyhow, the point is, you cannot call I don't believe owning a gun is a right. I believe it's a responsibility. You have to be damn sure, firstly, you can shoot straight. Secondly, you know when to shoot and when not to shoot. And the great thing about being in a country where only people who really need guns have guns is that you can be pretty much sure. We have had a couple of incidents where our self-defense laws have been called into question, but really those incidents have been blown out of proportion. When we look at, is it Tony Martin, I think his name was? Yes, the farmer, who was basically our equivalent of what you'd call a survivalist. And they were going on about how he shouldn't have been put away for, I think it was manslaughter he got, how he was in for longer than one of his victims who got away with an injury. The other one was younger and was killed. And they missed the fact of the case, and the fact of the case was the burglar was running away through a house full of death traps. He'd set up full of death traps, and he shot him in the back with an illegal firearm. So no, that's not an argument for self-defense. The other case, the Khan case, bit more shaky ground, but again, it was a case of him pursuing a fleeing perpetrator and basically getting a group together and beating the crap out of them. So it's not a clear-cut case. We have some limited degree of self-defense. Also, we have probably one thing I won't agree with is that we have one of the strictest offensive weapon laws, and one of the classic examples in the episode of one of the many Let's Follow the Coppers with the Camera TV shows we have over here. There was a motorway cop who found a baseball bat in somebody's boot, and he said, right, could you explain the reason why this bat's in your boot? And the guy says, self-defense. He says, do you want to rethink that answer? And he said, no, it's for self-defense. He says, I'm arresting you for possession of an offensive weapon. That is how strict our offensive weapon rules are. You cannot say a weapon is there for self-defense. You've got to have another reason for it. And to be fair, most people have a good way around that law. Who need to be aware of that law have a good way around that law. Especially in our bustling superhero community. Yes, another great thing about a place where guns are very rare, we have actual superheroes. Check them out in the link below. A little Channel 4 documentary called Suburban Superheroes. Brilliant, a lot of fun, and they are great people. Very, very troubled people, but they're great people, and they've got their hearts really in the right place. And they have various ways around it, and I think the rules are a bit strict. But to the other side of that is we don't really need to defend ourselves that much. When you're talking about when you're talking about crime in this country, it's we petty crimes. I'll admit there isn't a very good clear up rate. But I'd rather have a low clear up rate than a lot of dead burglars. But we do have a 96% clear up rate for murder, which is currently the highest in the world. The other crimes may be lacking, but that's quite impressive. And I don't think we'd have that if they were handing out guns at Asda, which is our version of Walmart. So there's my thoughts, and Gingrich can basically stick that up his arse. There is no right to have a firearm, as far as I'm concerned, and although I do have my problems with the so-called offensive weapons laws in this country, I'd rather not have some idiot claiming human right to own a gun. Thank you very much.